Hello, welcome to All For United WFC.
Good evening and welcome to All For United, the women's football chat show. Big topic tonight. We are talking Her Game 2 and we're also talking the partnership as well with FC United Women. The launch event, which is due to take place this Sunday. Big game down at Broadhurst Park. So we're going to get into that. We're going to talk about Her Game 2, what they do, and women's football in general. So tonight, joining me, I've got Connor. How are you?
Yeah, all good. All good. Recovering from yesterday. Good win for United, though, so that's always a positive as well. At least one of the teams can win over the weekend. That's a good start.
We always rely on one, don't we, to get us through the weekend. And obviously, Elsie, you're back for a second week in a row.
Yeah.
How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Yeah, I'm good. Excited to be back. I enjoyed it last time.
Good. That's what we like to hear. I've not put you off then. That's the main thing. Probably sick of seeing me, but never mind. We work with it. And Amy as well from Her Game 2. How are you doing?
Yeah, not bad, thank you. I had a nice, relaxing day, so that's good. And thanks for having me on.
That's a pleasure. I want to start with yourself then, Amy, obviously as a co-founder of Her Game 2. Could you just sort of explain to those that may not know sort of about Her Game 2 and the aims and things like that and, basically how it's going since you formed, really?
Yeah, sure. So we actually started the campaign back in May last year and campaign video, which you may or may not see. A million views or something like that. It was crazy. And it just blew up so quickly. And then obviously from then we realized that this problem ran deeper than what we first thought. I think like this was like something that it's been going on for a really, really long time. And, it kind of opened our eyes to sort of like the problems that were going on. And we sort of thought, well, this is a chance to kind of make a campaign out of this. Like let's do some work around it. Let's do some research and like find out where the problems are, like what we can do. And so literally since then it's kind of become very full time. Like as you've seen, the campaign's grown and grown and grown since then. And yeah, it's the kind of main aim of the campaign is to obviously create awareness of sexism, misogyny in football. And with that being, obviously, we started off as fans, but we've learned, within clubs, within setups, within organizations, as female football players, like female physios, female referees, like it's everywhere. And it's sort of about raising awareness of that, educating people on how to kind of do better, working with clubs to kind of find the best way to support the fans, support the staff and all stuff like that really, but mainly just to kind of get rid of as much of it as possible, which shouldn't really be needed, but it is, unfortunately. So that's sort of the general where we're at with the campaign now.
Yeah, because I know I was reading earlier and I saw it was a graphic that was actually on your Twitter and it said something after 5 months there was 22 partnerships formed, not only with professional clubs but there's also partnerships with grassroots clubs. There's obviously a bigger presence in sort of stadiums and on women's football kits. I think it said there was 1.8 million views on the original campaign video and something like 15,000 followers on Twitter. So I think in that first 5 months, the impact there is clear to see. And although, like you said, there's still work to be done, it's a step in the right direction. And it shows, there's a lot of people that, let's just say that the views aren't very... 2022 is what I'll say.
It's a shame.
So it is a shame, and I think we'll get onto it later. A word that you used, education. It's massive. But I think, like you say, that opening 5 months, it just goes to show one that it's needed, and two, the impact it has had. Elsie, I want to bring you in on this. Obviously, we'll sort of talk about the FC United partnership shortly, but. In terms of yourself, then obviously you've played football, you coach football, you've watched football as well. What does it mean to you personally to have something like Her Game 2 that's out there and looking to improve football, and obviously using the word football is for all, and equality. What does that mean for somebody like yourself?
It means a lot, I think, because I've been involved in football for a long time now, and throughout since I was a little kid all the way sort of up to now, it's been the same sort of issues all the way through. Whether that's not enough women getting involved in football in general, whether that's the views that certain people have around women in football. And I think something like this campaign will hopefully, because we've seen a change. It's not maybe as bad as it used to be, but things like this will hopefully progress it even more and mean that there's a lot less of those views around, and a lot more women willing to get into football and enjoying it as well. Because I think sort of maybe part of the reason is that they get involved in it when they're young. The older they get, the harder it is to sort of stick around in football as a woman. So yeah, hopefully things like this campaign can try and change that a little bit more, and work towards where we want to get to.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing I noticed as well, it was something that was sort of mentioned again on the Her Game 2 website with the merchandise, was about it sort of being donated back into women's football and sort of the development of that again, which is really important. I want to bring you in this, Connor. Obviously, putting money into football in general, I think we all talk about sort of from a grassroots side, things need to be done. But what do you think in terms of obviously the women's game? Because a lot of people talk about sort of the lack of money that goes into it compared to the men's, which again, we're talking equality and looking to level things up. It's good that, there is people, that are fighting this corner and really looking to boost the women's game, especially at a younger level. I think getting the young girls into football and things like that. But what are your thoughts on that? And is there anything else we could do maybe as fans to improve it?
I think it's going to be the key word of this show, really. It's education. I don't think you can put it all into money because, obviously we spoke to players up and down the women's football pyramid. And I remember something that Kerry Walklett said. Obviously, she plays for West Brom, but done all of her UEFA B of coaching badges. And something she said really stuck with me is that, as a guy, you'd never understand what it's like being a woman in football. That kind of the looks before you even get onto a pitch and those kinds of things. So the money's great and it needs to improve, and it will improve over the next 5-10 years. But it's the education as well that goes along with it, because you can shove money at anything, but getting people's perception to change and getting people more educated, I think, is actually more important than maybe the money side sometimes, because there is that still, none of us obviously on here and that kind of thing, but there are people out there with still those views. I think, Matt, you said earlier with I don't know the right way of saying it, but like not up-to-date views, if that makes sense. So a lot of people still living in the past. I just think that's as important, if not more important to me than the money, is the education, changing people's perception that they should be equal. We see all the hashtags and all those kind of things. And the more that is out there and the more campaigns like this, it changes people's mindset and it starts to educate people on what it's like.
Yeah. Amy, I want to ask you then, obviously we're talking a lot about education and sort of creating this awareness. And obviously, by having clubs on board and sort of getting, the men's sides involved as well. I think back to like the first partnership we had with Everton. And the men's team all wore the T-shirts. Is things like that then you're finding like the real driving force behind it in terms of creating awareness? Obviously, having these links, how does that sort of help, or how does it work in a way?
Absolutely. I think one thing, I actually had a call with someone earlier and we discussed this, but having like, obviously with the Everton team, and we obviously had some really great media with Dominic Calvert-Lewin, like he's a really like positive role model, popular role model as well at this moment in time. And if he's flying the flag for this campaign, you hope that, your little under 9 grassroots boys like look up to that and think, oh, that's cool. Like that's the message that he's spreading. Like that's really important. And because we were talking about how like men are just as important as women in this too. It's not just, if girls just say it, it's never gonna, it's kind of, you end up fighting a bit and kind of you need everyone to kind of embrace the message, I think, for it to really land. But of course, like a club as big as Everton to support the campaign, you know, the Leeds partnership as well was huge. Like we've got such a big fan base. Instantly, you've got eyes on the campaign, or what's that about? You know, what's this like? And it's just, yeah, it's as simple as that, about raising awareness, really. But we're lucky that the clubs are so behind it that it's able to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Elsie, obviously you like me work in a school, and obviously we're talking about again that word education. But in terms of like sort of relationships with communities and people, you know, in schools, you know, whether that's parents or whether it's children, I don't know the right word here. What would you say is the way in terms of educating it to make sure that it is equal? So to make sure that, you know, it's not just like Amy said, sort of girls coming out with certain things, it's equal and everybody's on the same wavelength. Because obviously you get, you know what it's like in schools, you still get even lads now saying, oh, well, you know, girls can't play football and all the typical stereotypes.
Yeah.
But what do you make of it in terms of like, again, just going forward and providing that balance and obviously creating sort of that link within the community?
Yeah, I think you're right. You still do get it even in young children. I work in primary school, and I am literally the football coach at school, and yet they still there's a lot of boys at school that still don't think girls can play football, and yet their football coach is a girl. We've got girls on the football team, and yeah, it baffles me when I hear them coming out with things sometimes, and I just think, like, your football coach is a woman, and I don't know how you can have these views. But I think it's very similar to what Amy said. I think it comes from those people that they look up to, and there's no point me saying to them, oh, girls can play football. There's no point the girls at school saying, oh, look, we can play football, look, we're joining in, because that's not who they listen to, that's not who they look up to, and who it's the people that, like the stars, that they hang on their every word. And you've got, even if you look at all the campaigns that Marcus Rashford's done recently, people sort of buy into what he says because of who he is, and they know as well that he's doing the right thing, but it's because of who he is that they're listening. If I said those things, people wouldn't necessarily listen to me. And I think that's where the things like the stuff with Everton, that it really, those things are so important. And I think probably a lot of young boys that are Everton fans, after they've seen that, probably have changed their view slightly. And I think if you could get more role models doing that, people in big clubs and big stars, if they're doing that, then I think young boys that look up to them will start to believe that what they're saying is true. And I think that's where the education comes in. It's no point me as their teacher doing it. There's no point us doing it necessarily in schools unless those stars are doing it too. I think that's where it's got to come from.
Yeah, definitely, Matt. I know you want to come back to obviously to role models in a moment. I just wanted to ask Amy what that was like, because you mentioned Leeds and Everton there. You know, obviously big, well-established clubs. What it was like, especially Leeds, seeing all the players, you know, in the warm-ups wearing the shirts, and just what that was like, because that felt like a massive turning point for, not necessarily a turning point, but a milestone for the campaign.
For sure. I think seeing like footballers that everyone knows, you know, footballers who play on the international stage, you know, the clips of them warming up, there was like really cool slow-mo pictures of them warming up in their tees, like on Sky, and it was like, wow, like it was very much pinch me moment, and the group chat was wild, as you can imagine. And, you know, everyone was getting messages, you know, like people, like my dad's friends were saying, oh, I've just seen Huggins on the TV, you know, things like that. But yeah, crazy. And it's just more about the fact, you know, you wonder how many people, well, I can tell you because the insights on our website just shoot up. You know, every time we're on TV or on a radio station, the insights just go crazy because everyone's Googling it, looking at the website. What is this? You know, it's just like basic marketing, isn't it? It's a basic advertising. But obviously knowing that player has seen you know, like I was thinking, oh, Dan James is like seeing our logo, like that's really cool. Obviously, you know, things like that. It's just awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that links in well, Connor, when he was sort of saying, coming back to role models. I think obviously putting that in the same bracket as the marketing and the sort of the advertising. I think the two go hand in hand for me, because with your good marketing and who markets your brand is massively important. And I think, again, sort of similar to what you touched on, Elsie, obviously it's all well and good us in schools or us that coach saying one thing, but if you've got like a Rashford or Dominic Calvert-Lewin or a Dan James, somebody like that, people tend to take note, because we know, as you can see, sort of from, for example, the Euros and other tournaments and things like how.
Oh, is he back?
No, I'm back. Sorry, Connor, if you jumped in. I was just talking about role models and saying like people tend to listen to obviously the male footballers a lot more, which obviously, like you say, then it drives the traffic, and people are then researching for themselves, or what's this about, and things like that. So I think that, and then obviously, getting female role models involved as well, again, can only help sort of aid that. I wanted to sort of bring you back, Elsie, and talk about sort of the FC United link. Obviously, the club have partnered up with Her Game 2. As I mentioned earlier in the show, we've got the women's launch on Sunday, and I think the men's is the week after on the 16th. Go just talk to me about what that means for the club then, in terms of like equality and everything in the women's team, because obviously it's been great that we've had the access to the stadium for games, and there's that whole one club ethos sort of push. But do you want to talk to me a little bit about that from sort of your point of view?
Yeah, I think it's a great thing what's going on at FC United at the minute. I've worked in plenty of different clubs, both male and female, and you don't see the push very often that's going on at the minute. This year in particular, the men's team and the women's team really working together, really trying to get it to be one club. And I've never seen that before. So it means a lot to me as a female in football, having worked at previous clubs that have never bothered with the women's team. I've been at clubs before where we've had to pay the men's team to use the pitch and things like that. And at FC United, it is just one club, and it's so good to see the men's manager, the women's managers working together to sort of create this one club thing and to really push women's football. We've got so many plans like coming up over the next few years to make it even bigger and even better. Even just little things like we train on the same night as the men's team now, so that we can all be together, and we know the men's team a lot more. Like I'll stand and chat to the men's team a lot more. I was making a coffee with one of them in the kitchen the other day, and we were just chatting, and it's just nice. It's nice. It's friendly vibes, and it means a lot. You feel a lot more welcome at your own club, and I know that might sound silly to some people, but I've been at women's clubs before where you don't feel welcome at your own club. They don't make you feel like you're part of the team. You're a separate thing altogether. I've been at women's clubs where you've never even met the men's team, let alone like actually been able to stand and make a coffee with them. So it's really good. Everything that's going on at the minute at FC United is been brilliant, and I think getting involved in Her Game 2 is going to sort of help push that even more. And having the men involved in it as well, having their own weekend of doing it I think is going to be great. It's not just like, it's a women's thing and we're doing it on Sunday and that's it. It's, actually the weekend after the men are doing it too, and they're getting involved. I think that will be great, and it's good to see that happening in some clubs. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, 100%. I just wanted to bring it obviously round from, because my obviously local, well, I say local side, up the road, my local side that I support, I'll rephrase, obviously Stourbridge women's side as well. Obviously Stourbridge linked up with Her Game 2 a few weeks ago as well. And one of the things that they said, speaking to the people around there, was how professional the kind of conversations were. And Amy, I want to bring yourself back around to this, because everything I heard from Stourbridge as a club, it was all positive about the meetings, and it was very professional and well done. And I just wanted to get your kind of thoughts on, because I think I remember when we did a show the last time, obviously talking about the men's side, but when you mentioned Her Game 2, you said it's important for us not to be seen as like a tick box.
Yeah.
And just your kind of your thoughts on that, and trying to change, because that is some of the very small perception of what Her Game 2 is, that it is just, we're signing with them just so it's, we look good as a club. Is that kind of, where does that kind of come into your thought process when you're talking to some of these clubs?
Yeah, for sure. Because obviously, initially, it did feel like, oh no, people could become partners, and then nothing actually happens. Do you know what I mean? Because it's very easy to do that. But a lot of clubs actually come to us, and one of the first things they say is, we don't want it to be a tick box exercise, which is really funny because we go, okay, good, this is a good start. But I think it's about, now we're starting to get ambassadors on board as well. So the idea is that for every club, we're going to have a female ambassador, and maybe she may even have 2 kind of advocates who kind of support her in that. Obviously, so it's kind of a link between us as the main team and the club. But the idea is that they keep the club thinking about what else we can do, what's next. Okay, so we've done International Women's Day, good, tick the box. Like, what are we going to do to support the Euros in the summer? How are we going to start next season? Have you sorted out those facilities yet? Do you know what I mean? To kind of keep those conversations rolling, because it is very easy to just sign up. And there definitely are clubs we've partnered with and we haven't actually really done much with them, and that's something that we'll want to address and be like, have you implemented this? What could we do to kind of open the season next year? Can we look at a female fixture and, start kind of having those conversations again? But yeah, we are very aware it could very easily become a tick box. So we try very hard for it not to be a tick box.
Yeah, 100%. Sorry, Matt. Just one quick point before you jump back in. I just wanted to say as well. I'm not going to get you to name anyone, any clubs or anything like that. But I thought it kind of links back in, obviously, with Everton. We saw Matt a couple of weeks ago. Obviously, Everton women played at Old Trafford, and you had Everton's main account, men's account, whatever you want to call it, tweeting 2 days before, "Oh, there's no Everton games this weekend," and it's like your women's team are literally playing at Old Trafford. Like,
Leicester did the same.
Huge.
And I think that just sets kind of a bad example, and that's where people's perceptions are not going to change. Because if you've got the main account that's got all millions of followers tweeting, there's no game this weekend.
Yeah.
Like, what kind of message does that send to your women's side?
I think the language is really important. I actually went to a really good event in Swansea at the club for International Women's Day, and there was a really interesting discussion about from FA Wales about the language that they use when talking about the men and the women, and how on their social media, if you go on it, it's kind of split 50-50 in terms of what they post. Like, obviously the post with Gareth Bale and Aaron Ramsey get more likes and engagement, but the way that they kind of address that, like, parity is really, really good. And the language that they use, they don't call it, like, if they were talking about the Euros, they won't call it the women's Euros, they'll call it the Euros, right? And then you can say, oh, the men's or the women's, rather than it being the women's FA Cup final or the women's Euros, to kind of like change that language. And I think that is something that I've looked at and been like, that's really interesting, because it gives the exposure to both sides of the game. Which is why, I do get frustrated when I go on to the bigger clubs and they don't post about their women and things like that. I think that that's a shame, because you've got a engaged fan base who, if there's no Everton games on but the women are playing, some of them are going to come and watch. Some of them will engage with that, and then you've lost that opportunity. So I think the language that these clubs use is really important.
It's interesting because obviously I was just saying then Leicester City did the same. They're playing Chelsea. It's not even like it was like, without being horrible, it's not even like it was Birmingham City. It was the champions of the WSL. And they said, oh, there's no Leicester game this weekend. Go and watch a local non-league side. 'Cause it was like national non-league day.
Yeah.
And I'm like, your women's team's playing at your men's stadium against the champions of England. Like, how much more Leicester do you want? It's bizarre. But it's just interesting you saying sort of about the language there, Amy, because another thing that I noticed, some clubs, they have, like, on the website, if you look at it, it says like first team. And it'll be like, they'll generalize it, and it sort of seems like they put the first team as the men, and then it'll say first team academy development team, and then there's like even no mention of the women's team, or it puts, somebody. It doesn't sound like, for me, your women's team is your first team as well. It should all be the same, under the same terminology. And I just found it interesting when you were saying then about sort of the language, because I still have conversations now. I'll say, oh, the Euros, and they're like, what do you mean the Euros? I'm like, the women's Euros, and people are. Got to know, like, well, why didn't you say the women's Euros? I'm like, it was just the Euros.
It's the Euros.
It's not like it's a secret. There's been promo because it should have happened last year, and people are baffled, and they're like, well, why don't you? And I'm like, but I shouldn't need to generalize what it is. If it literally says the Euros in England and there's a picture of Steph Houghton on the poster, we're not going to be on about the men's Euros, are we? And I think, again, it's that that conversation, it just becomes frustrating.
It's the same with the thing with like the shirts and how some clubs you can't get the women's names are not on the shirts and things, and like that's a conversation that we have definitely had with one club. It's like it's nothing for you guys to add that onto the system. Like, why is it not there? They wear the same kits. Why is there not the option to have the women's, players? It's just small things like that change it completely, make the women feel part of the club,
Yeah, absolutely. Elsie, I want to bring you in a little bit more sort of on FC United. Obviously, partnering with Her Game 2's now strategies. From talking to Natalie, I know there's strategies in place for sort of equality, and there's been talks over the girls' academy and things like that. What would you personally like to take from it yourself? Like if we spoke in 5 years' time, for example, and I know that's like going on a mad one in the future, but what would you hope the partnership would like achieve, either for the club or even for the area of Manchester, for people that come and rent that AstroTurf facility, because there's a lot of girls' teams do that. But what would you like maybe from the partnership?
I just think to keep progressing FC United in the right way, and I think we've already made a great start. Like I said before, we've made a lot of changes over the recent months, and sort of particularly this last year. We've made great progress in integrating the two teams, in pushing the women's team. So I just think keep that heading in the right direction. Maybe even try and accelerate it as well. There's no harm in sort of pushing it even more than we initially wanted it to go. I think even just some little things that people don't think of, like you've already mentioned about the language used and things like that. I think that's probably something that we should think about a little bit more as a club. When we're really trying to push the women's team, we're trying to get more fans, we're trying to get this academy up and running, we're trying to get these the integration, the men's and the women's team together. But they're sort of like bigger steps. But have we thought about the smaller things that we can do, like changing our language, things on Twitter, like you say, in the men's team, advertising the women's games a lot more. I think a massive one for me is the fans, getting more of the men's fans down. I go to almost every FC men's game, particularly the home games, but I go almost every Saturday to the men's games, and there's people there. I speak to them and I say like, oh, you're coming down to the women's game tomorrow, and they're like, oh, what are the women's playing tomorrow? And they've just got no idea. And I just think like just small things like that, I think we need to sort of, instead of only thinking about the big steps like the women's academy and getting these education things running, can we actually look at the smaller things too? As simple as advertising the women's games a bit more, getting people down, maybe even mention it on a match day at the men's and say the women are playing tomorrow. Like, get yourself down. I was literally speaking to someone on Saturday saying, are you coming to the women's game next weekend? And he's like, oh, it's the women's game next weekend. And I was like, yeah, it's a really big game. Like, come on down. We're trying to get as many fans as possible. We're trying to make a big event of it. And you'd be amazed how many people I speak to on a Saturday at the men's game that literally don't even know that we play at the stadium. So I just think, in general, the idea, I think, over the next 5 years would be to keep pushing, maybe even accelerate the process, but also look at those small sort of finer details as well, and get those little things sort of going right. Because once you know those little things, the rest will sort of fall into place, I think. We'll gradually get more fans, and the more fans you get, the more money you make, and then you can look at doing these bigger things with the women's team. So I'd say just those really. It's very, very simple steps and very easy to do, but it's about actually doing them.
Yeah, 100%. I think on that though, and this is going to lead me into the next bit, there is one thing that bugged me, and it was actually at the Christmas dinner. I'm not going to go into massive detail, but it was basically in terms of changing perceptions. And it came about through a conversation. Well, I say a conversation, it was more of an argument. There was one of the men's fans came over and started basically, it was on about the women's side, saying, oh, well, why is it a joint event and all this and all that? But what he didn't realise was he was saying it to one of the players and the manager of the women's team. So obviously that didn't go down too well, as you can imagine. And it was one of them. And I said to him, well, what women's games have you watched? And he said, none. So I said, so where are you getting your views from? And he said, I don't need to. He said, it's just rubbish. I'm like, well, okay, but what are you basing that on something, or are you just going with the idiots that say that online or whatever? And I think that's the thing for me, is that changing that perception. It's great if we can get men's fans down, but it's like, how do we change that culture? And I suppose I'm going to ask you that, Amy. Obviously, educational programs, I don't know if that's something that Her Game 2 does, but we can talk about that. And then I suppose we'll link it into, obviously, like, as female fans and female players, there is a lot of abuse, and it's from male fans. Let's not sugarcoat, I'd say there's a massive percentage. I'd be very surprised if it was, any less than 90%. But I think for me, but what do we do? Like, how do we work with that again without
Yeah, I think
without me keep saying education? Like, is there any thing like that?
Yeah, so I mean, the main thing I would say first is just like the exposure to the game, because the more I watch, the more that I realize how much I enjoy women's football. Like, I used to just watch men's football because that was what was available to me, and only in the last sort of 18 months has women's football been more readily available to watch. Like, you couldn't just watch a game, like a WSL game, you wouldn't be anywhere, or so now, I've seen it on BBC, I've seen it on Sky, like, and I've opened my eyes to the world a bit more. And actually, there's so many great things about the game, and the standard is a lot higher than what the internet would make you think. I think that's really important. That's something I noticed anyway. But again, like, I've seen like some of the big football channels, like, like Goal and like 90 Min and stuff, like championing like moments in women's games that were really good as well as the men's. And I think that's just a tiny thing, but so important. And then, if you want to talk about like education, like that's in terms of like anti-sexism, and like that is a massive thing from primary age right up to like professional football club level. I mean, that's something we're working on. We've got a few organizations who are like looking to do something similar. We're kind of figuring out how we're going to do it. And like kind of interactive modules, I suppose, is something that we would want to do that would kind of be aimed, one at women, one at men, and kind of like depending on what age, kind of that's definitely something we want to do. And it's kind of like, if someone gets kicked out of a stadium for being sexist or whatever, they should have to kind of complete it to come back in, things like that. I think that's something that as a campaign long term is what we'd like to do. But I think awareness of like the women's game, more exposure of it. I think the Euros this year is going to be really, really big. I think attendances after the Euros will shoot up. I believe that. I think that it's going to be great for kind of British women's football. And then, like you say, that obviously there's also the education side of it in terms of like role models for women in football and like the history of women's football, why it is behind. Like, there's reasons why it's behind.
There's a great book about that, actually. I've read. There's a really good book called In a League of Their Own, all about the history of women's football. Really worth a read, definitely. If anyone's interested in reading that, really, really interested. It's only quite a short book as well, but gives you a lot of information about the history of women's football, and really gives you an insight into why women's football is so behind men's football at the minute. Definitely.
I know, and I think a bit of education on why that's the case. It's not because women aren't capable. We know that they are. You started to see it now. I've started to see it in players, and I think, blimey, that like she's better than all of the Swansea first team today. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's that the women are so capable of being as good as men. Yeah, sure, men are generally bigger and stronger, fine, but that doesn't mean the game has to be less good, of any less quality. There's, I think, even another 5 years, I think with the exposure, the visibility, the quality will just shoot. So I'm positive.
Yeah, I think just to throw my two pennies in on this as well, it really actually annoys me when you hear criticism of women's football, particularly especially because I've been more around it this season, Matt, as you'll know. It's really frustrating because I've had it off some of my closest mates. Oh, why are you going to that? What, you travel up to Durham on a Thursday night to go and watch United away? Like, people, and I say this to any new fan, once they go once, you'll be hooked. Women's football is completely, there are obviously similarities, but there are differences as well. And I say to anybody, until you try it, I'm not going to listen to your opinion, because unless you've been, like, it's always people that have never been that have got high criticism of it. And until you go and experience it, like I said, my best moments in the last decade watching football have come from United women this season. Arsenal away in the Conference Cups immediately springs to mind. You know, that was one of the best away games I've ever been to. But you know, and it's I'm not going to listen to people that have never been and just criticize it, because what they do, they like to compare the two, and you'll always find it will be clips from, you know, leagues that don't have the investment in women's football, and they'll find a clip from there going, see, this wouldn't happen in the men's. It's like, have you seen some non-league games in men's football? And it's like, Elsie, you just said that, and Amy, you said it as well. Women's football's behind, let's say, 50 odd years. You know, it's still catching up, so you can't compare the two at where they are. So I say this on every show I'm on, I just implore anyone to try it. Old Trafford was a prime example of that 2 weeks ago. I had a few fans, United men's fans, that have come across for the first time, and they both came away and said how good it was. You know, some of them have been back since, and you know, but both of them couldn't believe it at the end of the game that the players come over and they'll speak to you, and you know, there's that connection with the players. I think just a quick story. The guy that was behind me, the one I brought along, and he was just like, "Oh, why are we still stood here? You know, at full time?" And I was like, "Oh, because the players will come around and clap because they've walked around the long way." He was like, "No, they won't." I was like, "Trust me, they will." And they came over and chatted with us, and he genuinely could not believe the kind of appreciation as well. So, yeah, it just really, really annoys me. People with loud opinions, unfortunately.
And also, if you're a diehard fan of your club, like, why would you not want to support the whole club? I don't get that. You know, simple, really.
Exactly.
Yeah. I want to move on to, and I'll start with you, Elsie, on this. Obviously, sort of being a female coach, obviously, in terms of like opportunities and things like that, because I think it's conversations I've had, and obviously from sort of coaching myself and going on coaching courses, there's a massive gap in terms of opportunity and in terms of obviously seeing female coaches on these coaching courses. They're very male dominant, but what have been your experiences of that? You can link it into sort of, say, any personal experiences or just as a general.
Yeah, well, I've done my I'm level 2 coach and level 2 goalkeeper coach, so 4 coaching courses plus all the sort of little extra bits you have to do. And out of every single coaching course or any other sort of even just little first aid courses and things like that I've had to do for football, I've never ever been with another woman on any of my courses that I've ever been on. So yeah, that's the sort of shows what it's like for women coaches in general. Yeah, and level 1, level 2, level 1 goalkeeping, level 2 goalkeeping, never been another woman on any of my courses. So I think getting more women involved in coaching is a big thing that needs to happen. Obviously there's been like a big push in general to get more women involved in playing football, but I definitely think there needs to be bigger pushes sort of higher up for female coaches. My experience on the courses has never been too negative, really. Other than being the only woman there, it's never been an massively negative experience. So I guess that's a positive, because I'm sure not everyone would say the same thing. I'm sure there's lots of people that have had negative experiences with being the only woman. But yeah, I think just the fact in general that every coaching course I've ever been on, I was the only woman, I think says a lot. And yeah, so I think something needs to be done there, pushing female coaches. I want to do my UEFA B next, and I can imagine I'll be the only woman on that course as well. So yeah, that's sort of my general experience of coaching in women's football. There isn't very many. All of my time as a player as well, to be honest, I don't think I ever had a female coach, apart from maybe once when I was like a little kid. I think the rest of the time when I was growing up and when I got into adult football, my coaches have always been men. So again, that says a lot about female coaches. There just isn't very many of them at all. Yeah.
It comes back to it again, I guess, Matt, it comes back to what I was saying earlier in terms of role models, because I mean, I think as soon as, and it will happen soon, I think, or I hope it does as well, because there's some brilliant female coaches. You know, you're looking at WSL, you know, Carla Ward, Hope Powell, I think she's fantastic what she's doing over at Brighton. I think once you start seeing that in the men's football pyramid, you start seeing, let's say Emma Hayes, for example, obviously just because they're top of the league, obviously with Chelsea.
Yeah.
If she then made that jump, let's say to a championship side or a Premier League side, whatever,
I'm desperate for that.
I think you'll then see more. Obviously, I can't speak for you two, but I think you then start seeing more girls go into it, because it's interesting to say, because obviously I bring it back to that interview obviously we did with Kerry at West Brom. She's obviously done a UEFA B, and she said exactly the same thing. She was one of the only girls there, and when she went to West Brom, that's the first female manager she's had, and she's been all over the WSL, championship, and that was the first one. And to hear that, it's eye-opening, and this is why, for me anyway, these kind of conversations are important to put out there, because I don't think people realise. I think people just assume that it's split when it's clearly not.
Yeah. What do you make on it, Amy, then, in terms of, like, obviously, because I mean, we can link that in as well, obviously, the coaching and sort of opportunities, but also opportunities for females to work in the men's game as well, now that Connor's mentioned that. Do you want to sort of talk to me and offer sort of views and opinions on that then?
Yeah, interesting. Like I just said about Emma Hayes, like I've said this before to the girls, I'm like, the day that she kind of moves over into coaching a men's team will be a massive day, because it will be the first time it's happened, and she's absolutely brilliant. And there's obviously the games are different. Like I would say there are different aspects of the women's game and the men's game, but she's so capable of that. And like you say, role model's a huge thing. If you can't see it, you don't know it's an option, right? It's just, visibility is huge. Like if you can see someone doing something, you think, oh, I could do that. It's the same with the women's football being more accessible now. I can guarantee the uptake and participation of women's football in the next 2 years will just rocket up, because it's now available to watch. But yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think it's also that question of, like, a lot of people will say, oh, maybe they just don't want to be involved. And my question to that is, it's like, yes, I agree that there are definitely more men who will want to be coaches than there will be women at this moment in time. But I think that there will be a massive portion of women who are put off by it for whatever reason, whatever barriers there might be. And it's about giving those women that chance to do it. It's not about like making sure every woman wants to be a football coach, because that's not what we're trying to do. It's about dropping the barriers so those who do want to are comfortable and able to access that. And I guess, that's something we want to look at as well as the campaign. Like, how can we, make those courses more accessible for women? Like, what communities can we go into to kind of like show that it is an option? Again, education for young girls, you put it in a module about like pathways in football, show that it's an option.
I think that probably is one of the big things in terms of coaching. I think obviously women's football's taken off a lot more compared to what it used to be. So women see a pathway in football now, but I think they don't see a pathway in coaching. They can't see how they can make a career out of coaching, and that's possibly why they don't go really any higher than maybe doing a level 1 or level 2 course, because they do like a hobby. They might coach their kids' team, or they might coach a local team, but do women see sort of a pathway in coaching as a career? And I'd say probably most don't, and that's possibly why they don't take it further and don't take it sort of maybe as seriously as the men do, because they can see that career pathway. They can see like, oh, I could do this as a job, I can make money out of this, I can get far, I can be successful. Possibly women don't see it in the same way, and that's maybe where things need to change as well.
100%. I mean, I know I've seen recently they do sort of female only coaching courses now. And I think that more pushing things like that, whether it's coaching or whether it's, playing and it's girls only sessions, I think, because obviously you mentioned before, Elsie, about obviously, you didn't have many negative experiences, but I can imagine those that do, it's going to put them off. And like you say, if you do your level 1, it's a horrible experience, you're not going to continue. Whereas if you're on a female only course or a female only girls coaching session, you've got that sort of, what's the word? You've got everybody that's sort of, together, and everybody that's pushing for the same thing, whereas it's not always the case. And I just think another thing as well with the coaching courses is the price, like as a general, whether you're male or female, the price of some of them and the time it takes is crazy. And it's so paperwork heavy.
I think that's where it comes into about the career paths as well. If as a male, if you go into coaching and it's going to cost you a lot of money, but you can see something out of it the other side, you're more likely to do it. Whereas as a woman, if you think, well, I've got to spend all this money, doing something where actually what am I going to get out of it at the other end? Am I going to be successful? Am I going to make any money out of it at the other end? Is it going to be worth all this money?
Yeah.
Whereas for the men, it might be, because they can see like, oh, well, actually, well, if I get this course, I can go into this job and earn all this money. Can women see the same thing? And possibly not. And again, that might be what puts them off as well, the career and the money, and they sort of link quite closely in together.
Yeah, 100%. Connor, I want to sort of ask you on this. Obviously, we're talking about. I'm gonna bring in FC United and this launch game. Obviously, we've got lots of promo this week due to come out on Twitter and things like that.
We'll get there in the end.
He'll come back.
I think
it's never usually this bad, to be fair. I don't quite know what's happened. I think you're back with us, Matt. Just about.
Yeah, there he is.
Sorry, my Wi-Fi is killing me. I was going to say, I was just talking about getting people over. Obviously, you mentioned before about getting people from the men's game. I was just going to talk to you in terms of FC. Obviously, big push on getting sort of girls' teams and young sort of females into that. Talk to me a little bit about experience in terms of the experience of coming to the women's game, because obviously you mentioned sort of being new to it and how important that is to get that message across, that, you know, one, to enjoy it, and two, in terms of coming back and keeping them as sort of regular fans as well.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, I've followed United all over the place, particularly from the men's side. And then the thing is, it's all about the conversations, and it's all about not putting it in people's faces so much that they're like, oh, come on, but making people aware of it. Because all I needed, I was watching, obviously, one of your shows, Matt, with John and obviously Natalie as well. And I just thought, you know what, I'll give it a go. I'll go to one United women's game this season. I'll see how it goes. Ended up buying season ticket, and I've missed one game all season. So, you only need, like I said, that one game sometimes. I think that's all it is. It's imploring people to give something new a try, because especially a lot of the things you see at the moment particularly on men's football, is the disillusion with the fans. That it's becoming such a franchise. It's going that kind of corporate route, and giving somebody a reason. Like, I can't remember who said it. It might have been yourself, Elsie, or somebody said it earlier about, if you support the club, why don't you support both teams? I follow the academy around. I follow the under 18s, the United Women Devs team. It's still United to me. I said that in my first women's game this season at Reading. It's still, all I saw was United v Reading. I still want to win. Same with the Manchester derbies we've had this season. It's red v blue. We want to beat them. I don't care whether it's the under 18s or the men's or women's first teams.
Yeah.
So it's just about giving people, and just the thing. It's about trying to push that positivity. That's the only way of doing it, because there are some people, and it's unfortunately negativity has a louder voice at the moment. And that's not just in football, that's just in society in general. And it's about giving people the positives of women's football. Why should you go? Speak to anyone who goes. If you're skeptical about going, if you're a bit on the fence, if it's United, for example, speak to one of us. Come stand with us at a game. If you don't like it, then fine. It's not going to be for absolutely everybody. But I can tell you now, I reckon about 95% of people that go once will go again. Because that's what I've seen this season. I mean, I joke all the time that I should be on commission with the club now. The amount of new fans I've brought to the season and got season tickets this season, just bringing new people along. Because once they've been once, like I said, they constantly go. So that's the key for me, pushing the positivity. Because at the moment, the negative comments are too loud, I feel. I think they generate too much traction. So if you can start pushing the positive comments and the positive things around the game, that will help people to start come across as well.
Yeah, 100%. And Amy, I just want to sort of carry on from that. Obviously, in terms of just being welcoming people into football. Obviously, mainly women and young girls, and sort of equality, because I know that's sort of something her game too looks to obviously push. Do you want to just add to that, sort of from where Connor's left off?
Yeah, sure. I think one thing that we sometimes do when a club has like a dedicated fixture or something, we try to tie it in with the women's team. Like, I know we've done it. We did it with Bristol City, and it was a case of like getting both tickets. Like, can we offer some like a double header ticket, so you buy a ticket and you can go to both? Because people might think, oh, I'll do that. I've not done that before, but I'll do it. And then giving out free tickets to young girls and stuff, getting them into their first game. If they go to one, they might want to go again. it really is quite simple, like you say.
Yeah. I think as well, what's great or what I like about the women's game as well is very affordable. And again, this is another conversation I'd had at Old Trafford. There was a dad next to me with his two lads, and he sort of, he said, "Oh, I can't believe it's £6." And I'm like, well, yeah, it's always been, at Man United since we formed in 2018. It's always been £6. And I said, and if you want to come again or you want to get a season ticket, it's £39. And he nearly fell off his seat. And I'm like, no, genuinely. I'm like, what you pay for one game in the men's, you're getting your season ticket and you're getting every week. And he was shocked. But again, I think things like this make a difference. Something we push on this channel, is supporting your local sides. And obviously that's how, we've sort of, myself and Gareth have become involved with FC and things like that. And it's massive because, it helps that, fans are not priced out. You can go watch football, whether it's locally, whether it's, WSL team. And I think, again, if we're talking sort of growth, it plays a huge part.
I got 4 tickets for a Euros game for £100. It's like a semi-final.
Yeah.
It's like, can you imagine that with the men's? 4 tickets for £100. Crazy.
Yeah. Connor, did you want to finish, obviously, on the last bit, the ridiculous thing that's been circulating on Twitter with those stickers? Because it just...
Yeah. I kind of want to get both your opinions on this, but Amy, I'll come to you briefly first on it.
Yeah.
Obviously, I've seen your brief post about it, but this, as Matt said, be careful what I say because this is going to go out before Watershed, I believe, but... The ridiculous, I don't know where this started, but the I'm going to call it what it is, essentially, anti-Her Game 2 kind of stickers that have been floating around. This kind of, if people haven't seen it, I'm surprised because it's been all over the place. And this is what backs up my point, that negativity is spiraling because this kind of thing. To be fair, a lot of the reaction back has been negative towards that post. That was good. But just your kind of thoughts on that and what Her Game 2 can combat that and get the positivity back around the campaign. Because I saw that and I thought, right, okay, they didn't have too many interactions, and then it blew up over the weekend, and everyone would have seen it. Just your kind of thoughts off the back of seeing that.
Yeah, obviously, we got sent it in our group chat. So basically, 2 of the girls who were part of the campaign, it was at their home ground, and obviously they're absolutely gutted. Like, they've not been able to come on socials because they just feel like they don't want to see it. They, all the hard work that you put in, particularly at a club who's, partnered with us and supporting us. And it's just frustrating because there just seems to be always someone or something. Every time you post something, there's always someone who kind of wants to come back with something. It's like the fact that someone's just actually gone to a shop and spent their money on, like, saying no to Her Game 2 stickers. Like, what were you trying to achieve? And I know for a fact that they're trying to figure out where it's come from, who's done it. And like you say, we hope that they'll be banned and have to kind of go through something to be able to get their season ticket back, whoever it was. It's just a shame, and it's just frustrating. And I try not to get upset about stuff like this because it's a very small minority of people who like to do stuff like this. But it is to say there's always someone who has to kind of ruin the fun. But yeah, just it's a bit hurtful. Some of the girls took it quite badly, and it's when you put so much work into something and then someone thinks it's funny to try and tear it down,
They should have put that money towards the kits, because I'll tell you now, if nobody's seen the Her Game 2 kit or the hoodies or something, the designs are fantastic.
Yeah, it's just a shame, really, that it's happened. But it's happened, and like you say, there's been so much positivity since. But we've all posted it. Like, a lot of us have posted about it, and our posts have gone so far. Like, Leah's has almost 2,000 likes in it, like hundreds of positive quote tweets. I've not seen anything negative. I've not seen anything in support of what that person's done, other than I even saw someone say, well, I don't really like the campaign, but this is really sad. I was like, you know what? That'll do. That'll do. So yeah, it just shows you why we need to do what we need to do, I think.
Yeah. I think, though, like you said, in a way, calling it out is, the only way to solve it, really, because like you say, obviously, even if somebody doesn't like the campaign, even if you're calling it out and you're still saying, well, look, don't agree with it, but this is wrong, at least that's, do you know what I mean? I can't understand it, and I still can't understand that. I don't know if you'll be able to talk about this, Amy, probably not, but the thing with Leeds, when, their social media account abused Karen Carney, and then it was like not long after that, they were sort of trying to promote sort of, equality. And I was a little bit
Yeah.
baffled because I'm thinking, how can you slate somebody that's not only a fantastic footballer but a fantastic pundit,
Yeah.
and then the next week you're pushing something that's promoting equality and getting rid of abuse? The whole thing just baffled me, to be honest.
I know, we did have a few comments about that actually, and we were like, well, this is why we need the campaign. It's kind of like we always try and use it as like a, because there's problems with things like, there's a couple. Talk about like Joey Barton's situation at Bristol Rovers, right? Like he's currently like on trial for domestic abuse, things like this. It's something that comes up a lot, and people are like, "Why are you partnering with that club?" And it's like because they need it.
Need it.
The fans, the female fan base need it. The female staff need it. Like we want it to be that way around. Not we shouldn't push ourselves away from those clubs. We should say like, actually, these fans probably need us more than anyone else needs us. That's the way we try and see it when things like this happen. Yeah.
No, that's spot on. It does make sense. It was just something that obviously for me personally, like I say, it was kind of like, hang on a sec.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You've abused somebody and then you've kind of changed your tune. But I think that's the one message, obviously, before we wrap, that we should be taking away from tonight. Obviously, one, educate yourself. I think, and two, go and watch a game. Have an opinion, but don't start going absolutely mental, especially when you've never watched a game. We have come to the end of the show then, so I want to thank obviously yourself, Elsie, and Amy for joining us. It's been really enjoyable, learning curve for me, and I'm sure yourself as well, Connor. And what I will say is, obviously, for those that watch us when it goes out tomorrow, 2:00 Sunday, Broadhurst Park, £3 adults, £1 kids. Big game, very, very big game. One that we're going to win.
definitely, yeah.
Go on, Elsie, I'll let you talk on it.
Yeah, massive game for our season. So the more people that get down, the better. We'll try and win for you as well. So that'd be even better. But it's great. You know what? Whether we win or lose, it's a great day out, and it's always fun. Everyone I know always says they have fun. So it'd be great to see like a load of fans there, and especially because we've got this Her Game 2 event and things like that. So yeah, it'd be the more the merrier. It'd be fantastic.
And socially, the bar's open for those.
The bar's open as well. If that persuades anyone.
Whenever we have a conversation, it has to involve that bar at FC, because they have worked hard, to be fair, to get that open for everyone. Nice. So again, come down. I know the players have obviously got the t-shirts, and there's a lot going on that day. Like I said, we've got little videos and things on the social media that are going out, quotes from the players. So yeah, like I said, there's no excuse when it's nice and accessible for everybody. Players are welcoming, staff are great. So yeah, get yourselves down. And apart from that, all that's to say is thank you for all of you that have tuned in, and we will see you for Thursday's show.